Another thing that we like to do from Upon Further Review is to go back over, sometimes rewatch, sometimes do a deeper dive into a game that we may have already discussed. And Tom, you mentioned that there was something that really stood out to you from Ohio State's defense in the win over the weekend against Maryland. So what'd you note from the Buckeyes?
It's rewatching it more than anything. What stood out to me is like, if you go, obviously Maryland overall had a good performance. They lost, they put up 30. Not many people are putting up 30 on Ohio State. But what stood out is like their offensive line actually did a good job blocking Ohio State. The sacks that the Buckeyes got were generally more on, in my opinion, on Talia than they were on the offensive line. But also it was a choppy performance in that Maryland it was a whole lot of nothing, 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 bang, explosive play. And just going back to watching Ohio State play Penn State when they kind of started running, the Baylor offense, the Briles offense, and started spreading them out, and they were able to move the ball through the air in that way. And seeing what Maryland, which has NFL talent at receiver, was able to do with Ohio State, I still have concerns about Ohio State's secondary, especially if that front four isn't getting the kind of pressure that they've been getting all season, because they weren't against Maryland. But moving it forward, I don't know what team is left on Ohio State's schedule that can do that. Like Michigan can't. If they get to the playoff, I feel like TCU might be the biggest matchup problem on against an offensive standpoint for Ohio State than any other possible playoff contender out there right now, which to me kind of like I'm skeptical about this Buckeyes team because when I watch it, it doesn't seem as sharp as I feel like it should be, particularly offensively. But then I look at the numbers and it's like, oh, wait, they're still top 5 and everything. So maybe I just have too high of expectations. But I kind of have more confidence in Ohio State right now, thinking like even after watching them not play their best game of the year, going forward, just looking at the possible matchups in front of them, I have more confidence in them than I did, I think, last week.
So what can Michigan do against this Ohio State defense? Obviously, the Blake Corum is going to be evaluated more. He says, I will be back. I mean, he's going to try to give it a go. How effective can he be? Is he going to turn in an incredible performance? Is this not as big a deal as we thought? I don't think that we're going to get any of those answers until the game actually starts in the shoe on Saturday afternoon. So with the lessons that we've learned from Ohio State's defense, both in the game against Maryland and also to this point, how does that matchup look? We were critical of JJ McCarthy in his performance against Illinois. We are looking at this Michigan offense, red zone issues, passing attack. Like, how does that Michigan offense against Ohio State defense line up to y'all?
Are they allowed to pick guys downfield?
Ooh.
Just a question. I speak on behalf of Tom and Brett Bielema for that question.
I don't know what you're talking about, Danny. Just because, as Brett said, we just got to work on learning how to stop that play in the future.
That was such a great line.
We haven't had I thought the pick play has become so prevalent that we're just not calling it as much anymore.
It is, but you got to sell it as the receiver. At least fake that you're trying to run a route, and you can even fake it bad.
He was straight
if you
blocking.
Just run out there and block the dude, it should be called. Like, that's it is a fine art form that every offense teaches, but that was about as blatant as a block that you could see. Like, it didn't even try to fake it.
Just want to point out.
I get why Brett Bielema is pissed off. I totally do, because he's 100% right.
It's not the Illini fan saying it, so just pointing that out.
Because Brian Kelly did it again in the Alabama win. Their 2-point play. A lot of people do it. They just sell it a little bit better.
That's what I was thinking, is that it has become so prevalent that you're just not going to get enough flags there. I mean, it's like ineligible receiver downfield.
Yeah, it's just, like you're not 1,000 times and it relents.
Yeah.
Or
you did ask though, like, what can Michigan's offense do against Ohio State's defense? I think it's do the same thing they did last year, and they do to almost every opponent they play. They try to bully them. And whether Blake Corum's healthy or not, they're still going to try to do that. That's the one thing that Jim Harbaugh, I thought maybe he would deviate from that because he made the switch to McCarthy. Like, oh, they're going to open up a little bit more. They want to get more dynamic at quarterback. Nope. They want a quarterback who can run it a little bit more, but they're not going to try to get in a shootout. They're just going to try to line up and rip it down their throat. And it's funny because I was gaining more confidence that Michigan could pull off the upset And then
Same.
watching them struggle against Illinois, I'm like, maybe not. But I still think it was a rough game for them. It was cold. Obviously, it's going to be cold in Columbus too. But there were a lot of teams out there that struggled in this, second to last game. Like I think it was one of those weekends where it's like, who really wants to be there? And I think Illinois, clearly they were set on that game. They were fired up. And I think Michigan just wanted to kind of get through it. Let's get on to Ohio State. And I think you could tell on the field.
Blake Corum. So Jim Harbaugh said after the game that the knee is, quote, structurally good. And on Sunday, Blake Corum, for the second straight year, according to the Detroit News, was out donating Thanksgiving turkey meals. It's one of the things he does, almost as like a spin.
With his NIL money, by the way.
Yeah, it's a spin on the NIL money. It's called Giving Back to Give Thanks. Corum was out there walking around, handing out the meals, and he told the media who was there, the Detroit News, he said, "It's good. My knee is good. I'll be fine. I'll be back." He did, again, return to the second half. I think he had one carry in the third quarter, but he was not on the field at the end of the game. So the shout out to you, Blake Corum. We do hope you are at full health. You are a Heisman Trophy candidate, and this is one of the biggest games of the entire season. Number 2 against Ohio State against number 3 Michigan. They do have other running backs that are talented. They don't have other Blake Corums. So if you are going to use the bully approach, I think you got to have number 2 out there as close to 100% as possible.
Yeah, that offensive line has to win the game. That's really what it's going to come down to.
There's a couple dudes out there for Michigan who didn't play in this game, and I kind of wonder if they'll be back, right? Like I think just kind of perusing, the Michigan message boards. Shout out Sam Webb, as always, does a great job for us, Michigan 24/7. I kind of wonder if Michigan kind of played with fire by holding some guys out in this game and almost got burned by it, obviously. I also wonder about Donovan Edwards. If Corum can't go or Corum is not 100%, Edwards didn't play in this game. He was out. So is he going to be out next week? Was he one of the guys that kind of held back? That's going to be really interesting because, from a physicality run game standpoint, who has Ohio State played this year that scares you? Penn State can run it and did some in that ball game. They played Iowa, which is just obviously pretty bad at everything on offense this year. They're not really physical in the run game either. Notre Dame, I guess, tried to run in the bunch on them. It's a new challenge. Also, how healthy is CJ Stroud? Is he able to be moved off his spot? What's his mobility like? I mean, he was limping a little bit last game. And Matthew Jones, the right guard or left guard for Ohio State. Okay. He's kind of an important piece. I mean, we've talked about a lot this year how Ohio State doesn't necessarily have the best offensive line depth. Is he going to be healthy and good to go? Michigan's much better on the interior defensive line than I thought they were. So
Wisconsin ran the ball well on him.
Yeah. Okay. There we go.
They
Do you
had
think that
192 yards, 5.5 a carry.